What is up, RX-8 Discord? So this is just a video for the newbies on what it's like to be a teenager and own a Series 2 RX-8. So we just got a cold RX-8 here. Let's see what happens. So the RPM is going to be really high when you start it up and it's really cold. It's not that cold compared to people who are living in places where it snows. According to this, it is 44 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which isn't that cold, but it's enough to give the RX-8 a hard time to start if you're not on a perfect battery. So if you buy one of these, make sure to keep it on a battery tender. So I mean, this is what it's like to drive a Series 2 RX-8 when it's cold. Got a little bit of vibration there from the brakes. You shouldn't expect that on your car if it doesn't have modified brakes. We actually don't have much modifications on the brakes, just some brake pads, but they like to make noise when you haven't driven in a while and it's cold. But I mean, it stops good. It's pretty comfortable. So we got that aftermarket Pioneer single DIN radio in a double DIN slot with a cubby, I guess. The factory radio looks pretty decent, but I like how this one looks better, and it was only about $100. So yeah, I mean, interior quality is pretty good, but it's pretty much all plastic, so depends on what you're expecting. So I know you guys are buying an RX-8 because you want to go fast. So let's see how fast this goes. There you go. Okay, so we're back at the computer, and I made this little Excel chart to try and explain what different types of RX-8s are out there. So first, you need to go test drive one and really decide if an RX-8 is for you, because it's a real big commitment. It's like having a baby almost. You gotta really take care of it. Otherwise, it's just gonna give you a very bad time. So there's two main types of RX-8s. The Series 1, which went from about late 2003 to 2008, and the Series 2 that went from 2009 to early 2012, when Mazda canceled the RX-8 due to poor sales and emissions laws. So Series 1, most RX-8 owners have these. The one that I have pictured is the 40th anniversary version from 2008. I know at least one forum member has one, so you can ask him about it. These outnumber S2s about 10 to 1. They're cheaper, they're more unreliable. They're technically a bit lighter, but it really doesn't matter. And some people think they're better looking. I personally like the S2 more, but you're welcome to make that choice, of course. The Series 2 is the facelift version. It's designed more like newer Mazdas. One of the most important changes is they added a third oil injector per rotor, which gave it more reliability. I'll talk about that later. They're better taken care of because people didn't really know how to take care of RX-8s until probably about 2006 or 2007, and that's when people really started taking good care of them. And they're quite a bit more expensive, sometimes by like 2 times, depending on what cars you're comparing. Some people think it looks like a cheap Mazda 3. Yeah, I kind of see that, but I kind of like it. And they have a better rear end ratio, which makes them accelerate faster, depending if you keep the power stock. And the one that I have pictured is the Spirit R. It's a special edition, just like the 40th anniversary. And I have a Series 2. I don't have a Spirit R because those were only available outside of the USA, as far as I know. But that's the kind of car I have. So if you look in the lower left corner, I'm going to talk about a few reliability issues that RX-8s have. This is where they get all of their reputation. So the biggest issue is loss of compression. This is caused by apex seal failure. And it's basically, there's a seal on the tip of the rotor that seals the engine and allows the engine to build compression during the Okay, so if you look in the lower left corner, you can see we have a bunch of reliability issues. The reason that RX-8s are so cheap compared to cars like S2Ks and FRSs and 350Zs is that they have this horrible reputation for reliability, which is only partially true. But anyway, the biggest issue is a loss of compression. And that's caused by apex seal failure. So basically, on the tip of the rotor, there is a seal that prevents that during the compression, it prevents the gases from escaping into another chamber. So basically, the reason that piston engines and rotary engines can make as much power as they do is they compress the gases before igniting them, and that creates more force within the engine. So if that fails, then your engine won't be able to compress gases nearly quite as well. So that just causes a bunch of things. It causes bad starting, the engine not running at all, loss of power and higher RPMs, and just a ton of problems. And the only way to fix it after your apex seals have gone is to rebuild the engine, and that's depending on where you are and what resources you have. That could be a $4,000 job to an $8,000 or $9,000 job, depending on if you have to buy a complete motor. So the best way to do that is just to check your compression regularly and know what you're buying before you get into it. And then I guess you can do what's called the Ferrari tune-up. So basically just take your car to redline once per day, and that'll keep the carbon away. So there's another thing that really didn't help with loss of compression. It's coil pack failure. So basically the RX-8 has a really, really weak ignition system. So you have to stay on top of replacing your coil packs to make sure that you can properly ignite the fuel. And if you don't do that, you're going to end up with a lot of hard starts. And it also contributes to flooding. So basically, flooding is where your RX-8 has a bunch of unburned fuel in the engine and it can't start. And that's usually caused by driving the car and then not shutting it off properly. And then not shutting it off before warming it up. Because what the RX-8 tends to do is it tends to run the car really, really rich until it gets to operating temperature. So that causes a bunch of problems. And it was really a problem with Series 1 and less of Series 2, but you should still pay attention to it. The one thing that the Series 2 added was a third oil injector per rotor, which really increased the apex seal life by lubricating it better with more oil, which is something that Mazda skimped on the Series 1. So if you want an engine that will last a long time, find a Series 2 with good compression, because that's going to likely give you the most life. Otherwise, it's actually not that bad. It's just the usual stuff that you'd expect from an 8 to 18-year-old Mazda, like an MX-5 or whatever it is. So let me tell you about a few drivetrains. So just in general, the reason that the RX-8 doesn't make as much power as it could have is because the port size is really small. So instead of having valves like a piston engine has, the RX-8 has ports to control intake and exhaust flow, and they're open and closed by the rotor. So the issue with the RX-8 is that in order to try and improve emissions for the RX-8, Mazda moved to a smaller side-mounted port instead of having a peripheral port. And you can go look that up and you can see where all of the ports are on the old and new engines. But the reason why you don't have a 300 wheel horsepower naturally aspirated RX-8 with this kind of engine technology is that the port size is limiting your exhaust gas flow. And that's why you only have 232 horsepower at the crank, even on the highest power model. So you have a bunch of different engines. So you can either have a 4-port or a 6-port. So the 4-port makes 192 horsepower, and it's either available with a 5-speed manual transmission or a 4-speed automatic transmission from 2004 to 2006. And they canceled the 5-speed manual transmission after about 2009, and you couldn't really find many Series 2s with 4 ports only. And then you could also have a 6-port, which has 6 ports instead of 4, so it has better intake flow. So you can either has 232 horsepower with the 6-speed manual. That's with every year. They're all the same except for the oil injector differences. Or you can have the 212 6-speed automatic transmission. There's two main issues with the automatic transmission cars. First of all, Mazda couldn't figure out how to make the automatic transmission cars reliable at 9,000 RPM, so they're limited to 7,500 RPM. And second of all, owners tended to drive them in lower RPMs just because they were automatics, so that really didn't help apex seal life. And the 4-port also revs to 7,500 RPM because there's no real point to rev it to 9,000 because it won't make much power up there. So if you really want the best RX-8, you should buy the 6-port manual transmission. So even within Series 1 and Series 2 6-port manual transmission cars, there's some differences. They have different gearbox ratios, and they also have different final drive ratios. So Series 1 will have 4.44 final drive, and a Series 2 will have a 4.77 final drive. And what that eventually adds up to is that the Series 2 will have slightly better acceleration off the line, but you shouldn't beat yourself up too much over it. And you can always put the Series 1 or the Series 2 gearbox in the opposite car, and same with the differential. So last thing, there's a bunch of trims that you can buy. So you could buy base automatic Series 1, but you really should avoid these because they're missing a lot of stuff like limited slip differential and all of the good things that you would want on a sporty car. So the most basic trim level you should probably buy is the Sport, which has a limited slip differential, and it has cloth seats. It doesn't have automatic air conditioning, but I mean it's there, and that's the one that I have. And it's still going to be a fun car. But you can also get the Touring, the Grand Touring, and the R3 if you're buying a Series 2. So the Touring has a moonroof and some other features, which I'm not completely sure. The Grand Touring's the decked out model. There's pretty much every option on these cars. Leather, heated seats, moonroof, Bose stereo, occasionally navigation. But not many people chose navigation, especially on Series 2. And if you're buying a Series 2, you can get an R3, which is basically, I'm going to say, it has the feature levels of a Touring minus the moonroof, but it also has it has Bilstein suspension, and it has a foam-filled crossmember, so that increases how sporty the car is. And then we have a few special editions, namely the Shinka, the 40th anniversary, and the Spirit R. So the Shinka is the way I understand it, is it's basically a Grand Touring, but slightly more sporty, with tan leather and with black cherry paint. There were about 2,000 of these, and they were only on Series 1. So the 40th anniversary, the way I understand that is it's the R3 before the Series 2 existed. It's the definitive Series 1 RX-8, and it only came in gray with red leather interior, and it has pretty much all of the same sporty features as the R3, but it's not a Series 2. And then there's the Spirit R, which I pictured at the top, and that is, in my opinion, the definitive RX-8. It's got every feature of the R3 and the Grand Touring combined, plus some unique stuff like these gold wheels. So if you're lucky enough to own a Spirit R, you should definitely take that opportunity if you like the RX-8. Okay, so this is my summary of what the RX-8 is and how it is to drive and what you should buy. So what I want to know is, what do you guys want to know? Just let me know questions, and I'll see you guys next time.